What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where me and my partner Brian Corshair, the Kid Flash, are gonna zip around and take us all the way back to 2013. Brian, was 2013 a good year for you?
10 years ago. Yes, this movie came out.
Yes, this movie came out. Did you see it when it came out?
Yeah, I have seen this before. I could swear I owned it. I did not. I had to go rebuy it to watch it again. I don't know how. I don't know how. Maybe back then I rented it, which is such a weird concept to think about.
Yeah. Well, wait. You mean like rented like a physical copy?
Yeah.
Dang.
Maybe.
Okay. Maybe from like Redbox.
Maybe I don't. I mean, I have used Redbox before. It's possible. I'm shocked that I don't own this on DVD. Not that I ever watch my DVDs. I have these three giant shelves, IKEA shelves that I like custom changed and filled extra holes in so they like perfectly fit DVDs and have extra rows.
Yeah.
And I have 3 shelves of them filled with them, and I never touch any of them.
Yeah, why would you need to? We live in this new age of everything streaming. Even though when you're looking for a specific movie, it's never on any of the fucking subscription channels you have.
And honestly, most of the time, I just won't watch it then.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah, I'm the sucker that ends up paying for it. But, we should probably tell people which movie we're actually talking about, right?
Oh, my God, we should.
Yes. We're talking about Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, which is pretty much the closest thing that you're going to get to the movie The Flash, which is coming out in just a few weeks.
We think so, yeah.
Yeah. So then you have seen this movie before.
I have seen it. I've definitely seen it before. I remember. No, I definitely read the comic before I watched the movie. But I've definitely seen it.
Okay, well, you mentioned the comic. Let's give everybody a little bit of context. This movie came out in 2013. Flashpoint, the actual event that it's based on, was in 2011. It was written by Jeff Johns. This was the event that basically rebooted the DC universe, bringing on the New 52, which was a very, very big deal when it happened.
Yes, it was. And, I mean, looking back, I'd forgotten how many tie-ins or, like, miniseries, you want to call them, where this event was. Like, there was, 20.
Yep.
Like, 20, full line of Flashpoint tie-ins for, every book imaginable.
Yup, and that's actually maybe my favorite thing about this movie is that they were able to incorporate so many of those little tie-ins into this movie.
A lot of those are very small little mentions, but
sure.
Yes. They probably did touch on them. I think the only ones I know, the only ones I've read are the main series and the Batman miniseries.
Yeah. I've read a few of the tie-ins, actually. I read the one that had Deathstroke where he was a pirate, and I read the one with Lois Lane where she was in the Resistance, and we'll talk about each of those when we get to them. But I wanted to point out that this is the 18th film of the DC Universe animated original movies, and it's the first film of the DC animated movie universe. So this basically, just like Flashpoint the comic led to the New 52, this led to a cinematic universe, but an animated cinematic universe for DC.
Which is now officially over.
Yeah. And so I was thinking that before we kind of dive into the plot and stuff, what I noticed about these movies, these animated movies in this universe, is that they're pretty brutal. They're pretty violent. They're more violent than the Tim Story, right? Wait, oh God, Bruce Timm. There we go. The Bruce Timm Batman, Justice League, and Superman shows, and they're a little horny too. Did you notice that?
Horny or corny?
Horny.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bruce Timm movies and stuff, not necessarily the cartoons, but even the cartoons were kind of horny too.
Yeah. The female form is very accentuated in all the Bruce Timm stuff, but still, those were broadcast shows. This is a direct-to-video movie. I don't know what this was rated actually.
PG-13.
It was PG-13. Okay.
But it's really violent and disturbing. And I know that the last movie in this series, which is called the Dark Side War or Justice League Dark Side or something, that one.
age or something. Maybe no, something with dark. Yeah.
It's got dark, but I know that like it's one of those where it almost feels like a what if story where they just like slaughter all these different heroes in it.
I think we toyed with reviewing that at one point, but we never got around to it. Maybe we should do that.
Dude, if I mean, I doubt this review will be different from everything else and it'll spark a new interest in our channel, but I would review every fucking movie in this series if we were given the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do own a whole bunch of them, mostly the Batman related ones, but
Right. So let's talk about Behind the Camera, right? Behind the Camera, it's directed by Jay Oliva. I'm sorry, Jay Oliva, and he has directed other animated features. He was also like a storyboard artist on like a lot of movies that we might know.
A lot of comic movies, yeah.
A lot of comic book movies, yes. And then it was written by Jim Krieg. I didn't look up what his deal was, but he probably has written other stuff.
And also, we get the credit for Jeff Johns as well.
Yeah. So then what's really interesting is the voice cast, right?
Yes. What I always liked about DC, although they kind of, with the new universe they kind of went into, they went with a more consistent voice cast that was generally different than the previous. They always had this like revolving door of recurring voice actors in all these projects. Like we do have Kevin Conroy in here, which is fantastic. It's always great to hear him. And then there are various other people here that have voiced some of these characters in other things. Like you'll see Steve Bloom here. He was Lex Luthor. He's in it for like 2 seconds. He's voiced so many characters, it's ridiculous. D. Bradley Baker's another very big voice, common, well-known voice actor. They have Dana Delaney reprising Lois Lane from the Superman cartoon. And we have some big names in this as well. We have Michael B. Jordan as Cyborg, which I really liked a lot.
I agreed. Completely agreed.
We have Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern. I mean, he appeared as Green Lantern a few times here and there.
Yeah.
And there was another big... Oh, Carrie Ells is Aquaman.
Yeah. It's funny. Let's talk about the Nathan Fillion Green Lantern for a second. I think he's actually perfect in this movie. Hal's barely in this, but I think he's just so great as Hal. And, for a long time, there was like rumors of Nathan Fillion playing Hal Jordan in a live action Green Lantern movie. And then we ended up getting Ryan Reynolds, and that ended up being just this big dud of a movie. But I think in an alternate timeline, like he would have made an awesome Green Lantern. Yeah,
it just needed to happen a little bit earlier, I think. They needed somebody a little bit younger to carry a supposed franchise, and it just wasn't in the cards. I mean, he's a moderately well-known actor. I mean, he's kind of maybe a little less on the radar these days. Like I think he's just in that show, The Rookie. Really?
Yeah.
And actually, he's actually coming back to Destiny 2, which is crazy because his character died in like 2018, and they're bringing him back.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. But like at the time, he was very popular from Firefly, and I was a huge fan of Castle for a while as well.
Yeah. He's had a pretty long TV career, and he's got that collaboration with James Gunn. He was just in Guardians Volume 3.
Yeah, of course. He's been in all the Guardians movies. He was in Slither.
Yeah. So, I mean...
oh, my God. What was his character in Super? He was like the good guy arch nemesis, sort of like Captain Hammer. No, Captain Hammer is Dr. Horrible. He's something. It was funny.
Yeah, well, he was in Dr. Horrible, too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously he clicks with guys like us. I think he's pretty cool, and he's just really used super well in this very small part. Like you said, Michael B. Jordan is Cyborg. I totally forgot about that. I remember watching this movie and thinking, oh, this is really kind of violent and dark, and I wasn't happy with it when I first saw it because I wanted the Bruce Timm Justice League. I wanted those kind of characters, and it was clear they were going in a different direction. The art style, I don't like to critique people's artwork really. I don't think it's kind, but I don't like the way that a lot of these characters are drawn, in particular Aquaman.
There's really thick jaws on a lot of these characters. Maybe they're a little bit too built as well.
Yeah.
Aquaman looks like the Hulk.
Right. But on second, watching it, kind of knowing that we've had many animated movies since then, I actually really appreciated this movie a lot. And just before we move on, I also want to point out Danny Houston played Lois Lane's dad in this, and Danny Houston. I love him. 30 Days a Night, like a lot of things, but he was in Wonder Woman, right?
Yep.
And then I'm just trying to see if there's anybody else that like kind of stood out. Well, okay, so yeah, I think that's good. I just had to make sure I mentioned that.
Some very well-known voice actors in here, and some people that just played a superhero once and done. Like the guy playing the Flash, Justin Chambers, never voiced a superhero before. Only time he's voiced Flash. He's apparently from Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
He's been in like 350 episodes or something like that, which is, I guess that show is still on.
Yeah, it just keeps fucking going. It's been on for like 30 years or something. It's crazy.
That's nuts.
But I was going to ask you, since we're talking about the Flash, do you feel like the Flash gets his time to shine in this movie?
Yeah, I feel like this is probably the biggest thing that Flash has ever been in. I think like the storyline. I think this is probably the most well-known Flash storyline to more casual fans.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he's not in it as much as you'd expect.
Right.
I mean, granted, he is the focal point. He's the reason that it happens and all that, and he is the how it's solved. But for that, I mean, they and I kind of do appreciate this. They really fleshed out this alternate universe very well.
Yeah, agreed.
And in order to do that, though, you kind of have to take away a bit of. I mean, Flash does not feel like the main character. I mean, I actually reread the main 5 issues before this as well.
Okay.
The opening dialogue is actually not even from Flash. It's from Batman.
Oh man. Yeah, well, I think a lot of people associate Flashpoint, the comic, with that Batman because he, besides the way he is in this movie, because it seems like he dies at the end of this movie, right? But in the comic, he survives and he is alive in the regular DC universe now too.
Yes, that's correct. And just to go back to the violence in here, I mean, the comic is fairly violent too. Like some things happen there. I mean, they're not, they're not too precious with keeping people alive. But I think the movie takes it a little further, honestly.
Yeah, I remember watching this the first time, and they fucking like stab Billy Batson to death, and I'm like, Jesus Christ!
Well, that happens in both.
Oh, okay. It's been a long time since I read the comic.
That is one of the things I actually would say was worse in the comic, because you see the sword go through, and you see like the lightning bolt, like leave him and all that. It was a little more brutal in the comic, but like the way they kill pretty much everyone else that they kill is much worse in the movie.
Yeah, well, like with Mera, for instance, it's gratuitous, right? Like one of the parts that's real cool in this movie is like sort of right in the very middle of it. Flash has electrocuted himself; he's completely burned, and he has these memories, or he sees like what's happened in this timeline, and he sees Kal-El's ship crash in Metropolis. He sees the reason why there's a war between Atlantis and the Amazons, and he also sees.
I don't want to glaze over Kal-El's ship crashing in Metropolis because they say it like kills like 35 million people or 35,000 people, something crazy like that in the comic. I mean, like it literally lands in the middle of Metropolis and kills a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, it's so fucking dark. I like in the movie, they probably do this in the comic too, how like it looks like it's going towards the Kents, but then it like flies over them. And
yeah. They don't show it. They only reference it in the comic. So. Well, then again, that's only in the main comic. I don't know if there was a Superman-centric tie-in that I didn't read. So
yeah, but like there's that sequence where they show what happened that changed this reality, and they show that like Atlantis and Themyscira were going to have like an alliance, and I guess it led to Aquaman and Wonder Woman either having like an affair or they were like officially going to wed or something. And Mera gets mad. She confronts Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman chops off her head. And they show the bloody sword, and then she also holds up Mera's severed head. It's like Jesus.
Yeah, and that they don't do that in the main story. I mean, they imply that that's what happened.
Yeah,
but they don't show that in the main story. It's very possible that was shown in one of the either the Atlantean or Themysciran tie-ins.
Yeah. So I mean, like. It's a very brutal story, whether it's in the comic or in the movie. But going back to like the whole Flash side of it, there's things in this movie that I don't really remember from the comic that I think are good additions. Like one part that's really cool is the Flash mentions how he needs to kind of draw energy from the Speed Force to go back in time. And so it makes it seem like it is sort of like a finite amount. And yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something about that?
So, it's a little different in the comic. So in the comic, so the whole premise of this is that Barry Allen wakes up in an alternate universe, and and everything's different. He's not the Flash. He doesn't have powers, and nobody knows who the Flash is. Nobody knows who Superman is. All this crazy stuff's going on, and the crux of it is that he went back in time and saved the life of his mother, which caused this ripple in time and changed all these events to create the world that we're seeing.
Right.
Where the hell was I going with that? I got too lost in my own explanation.
No, it's okay. It's cool because with the Speed Force and with Flash's powers, especially. Okay, you tell me in a sec. But what I wanted to say, my point was that the Flash's powers in general just sort of seem to solve everything just by, he's going to run really fast, and that fixes everything, right? And I like the idea of it being like this sort of finite amount, this well that you can drain, because that way there's like this suspense there. You know, it's like, we don't have the power. We can't go back in time. Because like once you can go back in time and change things, that really takes away the tension.
Yes. So what I was going to say was that aspect of it is not mentioned in the comic. And I think probably because there are so many other side Flash characters that also use the Speed Force that it just wouldn't make sense.
Right.
And now that there's only two and there's not enough energy, it doesn't make any sense. In the comic, it's just Barry just doesn't know what happened, and something happens to that that kind of like jars the Reverse Flash, like at a how do I explain it? He said he was like trapped in some kind of like loop, and something Barry does allows him to escape it, and then now the whole thing is that he was free of his existence was free of the existence of Barry. So like the problem with Professor Zoom / Reverse Flash is that he's from the future. His powers are based on the existence of the Flash and him recreating the experiment that gave Barry his powers. But without Barry existing, he can't exist either. But because of this, he was caught in because he was traveling through the Speed Force while Barry did this. He was like trapped there, and then Barry did something in the comic. I don't know what that allowed him to break out, and that's the kind of the final battle in Europe, and where he comes out, and then they have the confrontation, and then Barry finds out what actually happened. So there's no mention of the Speed Force or running out of power and like that in the comic.
Well, I like it in this, and in this movie, I don't think there's any kind of explanation for why Zoom is alive or exists in this alternate timeline.
Yeah, he's just there. He just shows up. They actually do have him show up in the background twice. Once he interacts with Barry's mom, who has a much bigger role in the comic, I'd say. And he also saves Lois Lane in order to kind of tell Barry that, hey, I'm here, come find me. Right.
And it's interesting, too, because in the comics, the idea is that he killed Barry's mom.
Yes.
Right? And, I mean, that's in the Flash show. I remember that being a big part of the Flash live-action TV show, too. But in this, they make it like just some guy breaks into their house and kills the mom.
Did they?
Right, because I just watched it today. Like, it looks like, Barry is running back in time the first time to go stop his mom from dying. And then the Barry that's been through Flashpoint is trying to stop him. And they're looking forward at the mom, and there's like a broken glass by the door. And then it looks like there's a guy walking over to her, and he's just kind of dressed like a burglar.
Oh, I guess that, I mean, the comic also implies that it was, it was Reverse Flash that did it.
Right.
But I didn't pick up on that in the watch, the recent rewatch.
Yeah, well, that's a Jeff Johns thing, as far as I know. I think that Barry's mom was alive for most of the history of the Flash, and then all of a sudden, Jeff Johns comes on, and she's
everyone needs to be an orphan.
Everyone, yes, all orphans, yeah. And while we're talking about like the live action Flash, I just want to go off on a little tangent real quick. They did Flashpoint on the live action Flash. Did you see that?
I did watch it. I think that was one of the big crossovers, right?
Well, it wasn't even a crossover. It was just like one episode. It was like the season premiere, and then nothing really came of it. They corrected it within like an episode.
Oh, maybe I didn't watch that.
and so obviously one of the main changes on the Flash was that Iris West was African American, and then that's where like Wallace West comes in, where it's like her nephew or something, and he's African American, and so he's on the show. And what I didn't like about the show was that they called him Kid Flash in the Flashpoint universe, but there's no regular Flash, so it's like, why are they calling him Kid Flash? It's just so stupid. It's like, hey, I'm Kid Flash. It's like, okay, sure. I don't know why I have to put the kid in there, but yeah. Anyway, I didn't like the live action version of it, but let's get back to the animated version. So, Batman is, a major part of this, and the Batman comic that was the tie-in, I think it was written by Brian Azzarello.
Yes.
And that had one of the best twists like ever.
Yes. This was fantastic and arguably is better than the main storyline, which is saying a lot because this is a pretty good crossover event, if you ask me.
I agree.
I think that's the tie-in was actually the Batman tie-in. I had heard like a buzz about it, was actually what got me to read Flashpoint in general.
Okay.
I just wanted to know what happened otherwise. But it was very exciting to find out that Batman was Thomas Wayne. This universe, Bruce dies, and Thomas and Martha are left alive, and they don't really touch upon it in the movie at all. But the big twist in the comic, spoiler alert, is that in the second issue you find out that the Joker, who is the only one of Batman's villains alive because he actually kills people, is Martha Wayne, and he can bring himself to kill her.
Yeah, they show it. They show like Bruce's death, and the dad is just beating I guess it's Joe Chill or whatever. He's just beating him to a pulp, and then the mom is hanging over his body, and then she has some of Bruce's blood on her mouth, and she kind of goes like this, and it smears it to make the Joker's grin. Yeah. And the vocals for that part are so great because she's like shuddering with sadness, and you hear that in her voice. And then it just like slowly turns into laughter, and then she has this like cackling laughter. It's so well done.
Yes, it is very well done. Although I have to say that one of the things that I totally understand why this is a thing, but they had to streamline a lot of the storylines,
right?
Including that. Oh, so they do show that. They do show her as a Joker. You're right. That whole one. That's the only time they show is that one scene.
Right.
But in the comic, it happens over time. Martha goes to a therapist, and eventually, Thomas doesn't kill Joe Chill immediately. He goes and finds him later on, then kills him. And when he comes back, he tells Martha, and then that's the point where she snaps later on. So
wow.
it was a lot. It's just a lot more suspenseful, I guess.
Yeah.
In the comic, but I totally understand why they needed to encapsulate that in a minute of animation rather than fleshing it out in this movie.
Right. Yeah, it's great, and I like that Thomas Wayne character, especially like his how different he is from Bruce, right? Like because Gotham itself is different. Gotham's almost like Las Vegas in this.
Yeah, Thomas runs like a corrupt casino because he was trying to manage the crime in the city rather than letting it run rampant.
Yeah.
Interesting.
and yeah, right. And like one point, there's a great joke in this movie where like Flash asks him, "Do you have the bat plane?" And he's like, "The bat what?" And then instead of having like the cool bat wing, he has just like a regular fucking jet.
Yeah.
They're all traveling on. We're so used to these sort of alternate timelines, and they kind of always have the same pattern, right? There's always like one person that didn't change, and they wake up in this crazy world. Then there's this like battle at the end where the world's literally going to end, and they're able to stop it and reverse things. And I've seen it so many times. I've seen it on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think probably the most obvious answer you and I can think of is like X-Men Age of Apocalypse.
Yep.
And I like that. I like that kind of story. It's fun because like you get to do all these kind of twisted things with the main heroes, and you kill them off usually. People are just like so excited to see superheroes die because they don't normally die.
It's interesting because the life of a superhero essentially is is immortal because they always find a way out, and if they die, they come back. But
Yeah.
it's like it's almost interesting when it seems more permanent, you know?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So out of all the kind of variations, right, besides Barry's story, like which is that he wasn't the Flash, and the Batman story, which one of the weird twists do you like the best?
Ooh. Oh man, that's tough. Maybe the Superman storyline, because essentially he blows up Metropolis when he lands, and he's just kept in a bunker his entire life, never seeing the sun.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. He comes out this kind of like emaciated, like skin and bones kind of thing, and in the animation he's still got the big fat thick neck somehow, but it is, everything else like skin and bones.
Right.
But just seeing him come out and just not understanding his powers or anything like that, and basically killing a bunch of soldiers. That was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, I really like his relationship with Cyborg. The way that he and the Cyborg interact.
Because Cyborg is essentially like the most famous hero in this world, and
right.
He is essentially Superman, really, because in terms of trust and popularity, I guess.
Right. Like the president defaults to Cyborg at one point. He's kind of like, oh, what are we going to do about the situation with the Themyscirans and the Atlanteans?
Yes.
I was going to say that like Cyborg is such an interesting character because he's such a main player on the Teen Titans and then the Titans eventually, and he really got his time to shine in the New 52 as being a member of the Justice League. But he's never been like one of the main characters, even though being on the Justice League kind of elevated him. He when he's done well, I really like him a lot, especially when he's got that sort of I have to be the hero, even though I'm sort of a body horror robot monster. I have to be this sort of like Superman-like hero.
Agreed.
And that's the way he is on our Doom Patrol show that we love so much.
Yeah, I mean, I would arguably say that a lot of times with these, with the Justice League, even the Avengers too, the storylines they come across as a team are often far better than their individual ones, with various exceptions, especially Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
I would argue Green Lantern too, with all the Blackest Night and Sinestro Corp War and all that stuff. Yeah. Like he has some pretty big solo things that are Eclipse things, and he's not always a part of the Justice League either. Right.
Yeah, no, he's like one of those characters that really shines when he's on the team. You're 100% right. But in this particular,
that's what I'm saying is I think most of these characters shine better as a team than their individual outings.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Cyborg I think has only had like a solo title like maybe 2 or 3 times tops, and I know he's getting a new one now because like DC is doing this whole DC like
Gone
of DC, right? Thank you. Yeah. So he's getting another title, and it's kind of cool because he's like more dressed up. Like Cyborg typically just is like robot parts and then just like a face and maybe like a human arm. But in the Doom Patrol show and in the new comic, he's like more like dressed up like a regular person.
Yeah.
He's trying to be more.
He's a regular person in Doom Patrol, pretty much.
Now he is, right? Yeah, because he's changed. Yeah, absolutely. But I like that too. I like the weird kind of team that is the Resistance with Lois Lane, and because I like the Wildstorm stuff. Like I like that Grifter was in this randomly.
Yeah, that always. I mean, Grifter was one of those characters in the '90s that like everyone always thought was so cool and everything like that. I always kind of thought that he was one of those characters that just looked cool, and then I didn't really know much about him other than him looking cool.
Right.
I always thought it was so odd when they combined Wildstorm into DC. Completely I still don't think it works at all. No, really.
I agree.
Like maybe the lone exception is I think Midnighter worked in some capacity as a character in various things. Right. But I think that might be it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that too. Yeah, I actually really like Wildstorm, and Wildstorm by itself, before it got purchased by DC, has like a lot of really good books written by people you wouldn't expect, like Grant Morrison and Alan Moore and Mark Millar, like all these random people, And
like it always felt weird when they were just like smushed into DC. But like that's kind of the way the DC Comics is. Like they've always had their main characters, but then they've like absorbed other characters into their line.
Yeah, like we've talked about in the past. Captain Marvel is originally not Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Right.
He's from Foster Comics. He wasn't part of DC, and they kind of, but he feels kind of like at home now.
Right,
I guess that was before our time that we saw it that way. But being that we grew up and seeing Wildstorm as his own thing, then seeing these things together, it's like, well, this is a little weird. Kind of like how Conan was in Marvel for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
weird.
That was really weird. It's like on the Avengers, like what the fuck? Yeah. But it's cool because he like interacts with Grifter interacts with Batman at one point. He's like, "Oh, Batman and Grifter, that'd be cool." And then he gets like fucking shot with a bunch of arrows and dies. Who do you think was the most gruesome death out of all the heroes?
Oh, the heroes. Gruesome. Aquaman gets his arm shot off and then failed.
Yeah.
Cyborg gets kind of messed up. He didn't die though, but you see his like heart exposed. That was a little messed up. That big overall though. I mean, clearly it's Reverse Flash.
Oh yeah.
Because Batman shoots him in the head, and literally you see Batman through the hole in his skull.
Yeah. So fucked up. I love it though. Yeah. Because he's so like arrogant and he's like so happy at that point, and just boom, good job, Batman, who was gonna die any minute too. It's rough. It's very brutal. There's this whole sequence, a pretty prolonged action sequence where like Lex Luthor and Deathstroke are in these like ruins of a city that was flooded by Atlantis, and you see all these Atlanteans fighting them. And everyone's really brutal. People just get like shot with harpoons and get thrown backwards. You see freaking Kaldor, which made me really happy.
At the time, he wasn't in the comics yet. I don't believe it. He shows up first in New 52, right?
If even then, I don't know. I think
he's not the exact same character as Young Justice.
Right.
He does have like an alter ego, a land alter ego that's like Jackson something, or is that a totally different character?
I'm not sure. I need to look it up. I thought that like in Brightest Day was when he showed up, and I think Brightest Day is before New 52.
Okay.
It goes like Blackest Night, Brightest Day, and then like I think Flashpoints after that.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean he's great. I mean, we love him from Young Justice. Like Ocean Master's there, Black Manta's there, and they're just fucking mowing down Deathstroke's forces, and he has like Icicle Jr. or whatever the fuck that guy's name is, and he has Clayface on his team.
Yeah. The whole bunch of there, yeah.
Yeah, and they just fucking just like evaporate Clayface. I thought that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that was pretty. Yeah, he got just pretty much.
And I like that like both the Atlantean forces and the Amazon forces kind of had like creatures too. Like the Amazons had like the fucking
Cerberus and a Minotaur.
right. I love that shit. But yeah, going back to like what I said was like my favorite. I just like that weird ragtag team of like the Resistance with like Lois. Then you have like Etrigan on the team and Grifter. There's this weird like mosquito guy who like you never see again in anything.
Oh yeah, the Canterbury Cricket.
Yeah. Oh, he's a cricket. Okay. It's a mosquito. Yeah. He was in Flashpoint, and then I don't think I remember seeing him in anything else.
Yeah, it took me a minute to remember who he was. I think they did address him by name, possibly.
Yeah.
I was also really interested too. I always like to find out in these alternate universes like who steps up and is like the heroes.
Right.
It's like they wanted to take out all the other main ones and have them either not exist or be dead or something.
Yeah.
But there's one scene where Cyborg tries to recruit Batman to like kind of like join this group to stop this war, and then you see all these like weird characters like Enchantress and you have the Shazam kids. I can't remember anybody else off the top of my head now because they're all weird, not well-known characters.
Yeah.
And in the comic, there was a lot more characters that showed there, but still, like they're all like C and D tier characters essentially.
Right.
Stepping up here because the world's that messed up.
Yeah. I think I remember seeing like Sandman, but like the Wesley Dodd Sandman from like the Justice Society.
Sandman, yes.
He was in this movie. Yeah. And then there's like a weird villain too called Yo-Yo, and I was like, is that actually Harleen Quinzel, but she became Yo-Yo? You know?
The voice actor that doing it sounds like it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think it was confirmed. One of the things too that I thought was really interesting with the Batman comic version is there's a part where Jim Gordon goes to talk to Oracle, and you find out that Oracle is actually a paralyzed Selena Kyle, and that he never got married and had kids, so Batgirl does not exist.
Whoa!
And that's when you kind of find out, like, why hasn't Batman killed Joker? That's what she says. Like, I don't understand why she's still alive.
Wow. So Selena Kyle was paralyzed by the Joker.
Yes.
I don't think I read that. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's been
it's
so
not
long
mentioned in the movie at all.
Right. It's just so much, It's because that's what they did with Age of Apocalypse too. There was all these different solo books, and there was like the main Age of Apocalypse Alpha and Age of Apocalypse Omega.
Yeah, and then there was like four or five different team books.
Yeah, and I just love all those weird little tie-ins, all those weird things.
Yep.
So then I guess, like, unless you want to talk a little bit more about the movie specifically, I was thinking that we could talk about the similarities between this and what we see in the Flash trailers.
Yes, sure. I think I'm done talking about the actual movie. I really did enjoy it. I agree with you that I liked it a lot more now than I did in the past. You made a really excellent point earlier that how we were back then, we were all kind of expecting the Bruce Timm style, and it kind of was like a little bit of a downer.
Right.
But yeah, now that we've seen so many different styles, it's like a little more palatable, even though we don't like it as much. Because, like you said, like everyone is a little too muscular, and the chins were way too thick. But yeah, so what do we know about the Flash? We know that Barry goes back in time to stop his mother from dying.
Right.
The difference here being, though, that he meets another Barry, which is not something that happens here. He kind of Barry in the animated movie, in the comic, kind of assumes the place of that universe's Barry. Where in this we're having two, and I'm guessing that's because they need one to fill the role of Reverse Flash. He kind of hasn't existed in the DC movies yet.
Agreed. I think you're right. And there's one line that we forgot to mention from the animated movie that I think will play in this movie too. Thawne says something like, when you break the sound barrier, there's a sonic boom. When you break the time barrier, there's a time boom. And that's what explains all the Atlantis shit and, all the other things like Clark's origin and stuff. So like the thing that I can't get around is in the Flashpoint comic, Bruce dies and his dad becomes Batman. In this, it's like Bruce is going to be the Michael Keaton Batman.
Is he? Is he Bruce?
Come on, he has to be Bruce.
I mean, he has not said he's Bruce Wayne. But I think it is very likely that he is. I think that's one of the things they're going to kind of get around saying there. That he will be that version, if not the exact version, a very similar version.
Yeah. Because, I mean, okay, so, like, I like the idea that, like, what Thawne said, which is that, like, you create a time boom and it makes these ripples that changes the details ever so slightly, right? So maybe it makes it that Bruce was born earlier, and so he's older, and, it just things kind of happen a little bit differently in Gotham, and that's how we get this Michael Keaton Batman. I don't know why Clark would be like missing completely, but obviously like the origin, like the Clark story in this movie that we're reviewing is what happens to Supergirl in the new movie.
Yeah, and then we have the General Zod, and the Kryptonians from Man of Steel as a replacement for the war of the Atlanteans and the Themyscirans.
Right. So I wonder, like, when this is all resolved, because I think that DC's plan was, before James Gunn came on, that, like, the Michael Keaton Batman was going to be in the regular universe, and he was going to be, like, a mentor to, like, Batgirl and Supergirl. Have you heard that?
Yes.
But I don't think that, like, I think that's just done. Like, I don't think they're going to do that at all.
Well, yeah, because that's essentially what was going to be in the background movie that got shelved.
Yeah. So, like, I think what's going to happen in this movie is there will be things that are kind of parallels, Like, in the Flashpoint Paradox that we just watched, there's this opening sequence where the rogues attack the Flash Museum, and Barry's there, and he tries to stop them all, but then the Justice League backs him up after he gets caught. And we have this interaction with Batman at that point, and then like we just wake up to this new universe. And I think that the movie will be very similar to that. I think that like we'll get like a flashback sequence with the mom dying. Then we'll get a modern day sequence, and it's just going to have Ben Affleck, Bruce, and Ezra Miller Flash. Yeah. Then it'll like wake up, and it'll be in a different reality. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And one of the details we know from the new Flash movie is that there are essentially no metahumans around, other than Supergirl and the Kryptonians. There's nothing else. So apparently, there's no Wonder Woman, there's no Aquaman, there's no Cyborg or anything like that. Although I've also heard that there are some other cameos we have not seen or heard about yet.
I've heard that too. Yeah, and it's very, very possible that like it's not going to be that Barry like wakes up and he's like, "What has happened?" It's going to be that like we see him go back in time and like save his mom. I think that's very possible.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and then he'll run into his past self, and then they'll probably have a sequence that's kind of similar to the sequence in this, where they have to like break Supergirl out versus breaking Superman out.
Yes.
I think that maybe like that might be in some sort of like base that's in the Arctic somewhere that they break into.
Yeah, it does look like they're on some kind of base or platform or something somewhere.
Yeah,
they do mention it being cold or something, I think.
Right. And then I mean, just basically like Zod will attack, and that'll be kind of like you said, the Atlanteans and the Amazonians fighting. I don't know. I mean, when it ends, I guess Ezra Miller will still be the Flash. I don't know.
I've heard the director mention that if there's ever a sequel to this, like they couldn't imagine anyone else being the Flash. And then he would want to work with him again. Andy Machete, I believe.
Yeah.
The big question on my mind is how the movie's resolved.
Right.
With the comic, and even with the animated movie, not as much as the animated movie. The comic, it's implied that there is some merging of universes that's going on, and that's what happens with that's what starts the New 52. The only thing we kind of get out of this is that they're starting the new DC animated universe, and we get a hint of the next movie, which is it Justice League War, which is essentially a retelling of the first New 52 arc of Justice League.
Right. Yeah,
so I mean, what's going to happen after? Because Barry's going to have to, reset things eventually. So what happens after? Is this going to be? Are they going to merge a bunch of stuff together? Is this how they exercise Henry Cavill and whatever else? They don't want anymore.
I think that
Wonder Woman 84 and only keep Wonder Woman.
I wish, man. I wish that movie's so bad. And isn't it weird? Like they have like Pedro Pascal in that movie, and it's still like dog shit.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's funny because we no longer hear scandal about Ezra Miller anymore. Like, there's nothing like that, even though it was like almost every other day back in the day.
Yeah, I think they got it under control. The studios had a talk with them, and said like, hey man, like we got a lot riding on this. You got to lay low for a little while.
Right. So I mean, like the reason why I make that point is because I bet you $50 that the last scene of this movie, or like one of the last scenes of the Flash movie, would be like that Flash interacts with Batman, but it's the Michael Keaton Batman. Like that has merged into the universe he lives in. And that like Supergirl's around, but maybe you would have seen like Henry Cavill for like a second too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of feeling that this is going to be a one and done for Michael Keaton. He is a lot older. Like I don't know how much they can use him. I mean, I think the idea. I think you were right about the idea that he was supposed to essentially be around as a mentor. But I feel like this is going to be the one. This is going to be it for that.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. I think that that's what's going to happen. But I think that like when this was first being put together, it would have gone a different way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm looking forward to it even more now after watching Flashpoint Paradox.
Yeah, totally. I'm really excited. I have heard a lot of good things about the movie. How it's like the best movie of the year and all this. Granted, some of that sounds a little like fake and forced, but
Yeah.
you know, I honestly, because James Gunn said it's his favorite movie of the year, even though he's kind of obligated to because he's kind of in charge. Like I weirdly trust that, but we've seen some weird people comment on it. Like Stephen King said, like, "Oh, I saw The Flash and it was really good," and he's one of those people that always like shits on superhero movies generally.
Yes.
There's a comment going around that Henry Cavill watched it and liked it. I don't know how true that is.
Yes.
I think that came from like a comment from the actress that's playing Supergirl. But so there's some weirdly like forced publicity from some famous people for this. So I mean, that's kind of like a little questionable to me.
Yeah.
But I would like to believe that, you know, at least James Gunn is on the level and is saying like this is actually a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't, I think that they would have tried to bury it or something by this point, because there was like a really dark time where like Ezra Miller was really just like a menace. And I think that if they could have gotten rid of this movie, they would have.
Yeah. But at the same time, it is an excellent opportunity to kind of reset everything and go in the new direction, start in the new direction that they want to go in, just like the comics did.
Yeah. Well put. So, I mean, we now have what? We have Spider-Verse is this week. It's coming out in like a day or two, right? And then
I'm seeing it tomorrow.
oh, nice. I'm going to see it on Friday. And then the week after that is going to be
Transformers.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
And then there's a break, and then there's Flash, right?
No, it's
just like boom.
Yeah, it's the 2nd, the 9th, and the 16th.
Holy shit!
Crazy 3 weeks for comic book fans.
And for Comic Books Transform. So make sure that you guys are subscribed. Brian and I are going to be covering all those movies like we have done. We've covered Into the Spider-Verse. We've covered Bumblebee. And now we're covering Flashpoint Paradox. Now we're going to cover Across the Spider-Verse. We're going to cover the fucking Rise of the Beast. And then The Flash. So let us know what you thought about this movie. And if you guys would want us also to keep covering these DC animated movies, because I would absolutely be down. Cool. All right. Well, we will see you guys next week for some fucking Spider-Verse.